Good morning, Vikings fans. This is Morning Joe's, brought to you by Gray Duck Vodka. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of, I have to take a deep breath because there's lots of it, PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and the brand spanking new PurpleTerritoryRadio.com, where hopefully you are listening to the show as we speak. I'm here with Mr. Joe Oberly, who is...
Howdy. What? Go ahead. You're going to say something nice about me?
Well, in retrospect, I was going to say you're calling in from an icy ditch.
Yeah, I'm trying to find some Gray Duck Vodka for my tea this morning.
Joe's the editor of Purple PTSD, Vikings Territory, and I guess Purple Territory Radio, even though there's not a lot of written content.
Wow, I like it.
Springing a promotion on you.
Yeah.
This is live radio at its best.
Does it come with a raise?
No, it's actually it comes with a pay cut.
Wow.
Times are
sure
tough.
May have another.
How you doing, man?
I'm all right. I'm hanging in there, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm looking out the window and I see more snow coming. I'm pretty darn sick of the snow.
Oh, it's not snowing here yet. But
I'm way up in the bold north of Fridley, so it's...
I don't think I talked about this on air, but I'm a bigger guy in every sense of the word, but for whatever reason I was getting into my SUV and I decided to put both feet on the running board that's underneath the door, even though I don't need to. And I committed, though, which I'm proud of myself for doing it, and by going with both feet simultaneously, and I wiped out big time. Somewhere in the fall, the doctors think that I must put my hand behind me, but I don't remember doing that. But I ruptured a tendon in my ring finger on my right hand, and I'm right-handed, and then I partially tore two of them in my arm/wrist, and so it's awful. I broke this hand twice in college, which is why I don't drink anymore, and this is easily way more painful, especially because I use my hand to write, or at the liquor store, or because I've been single for 5 years. Ayo!
Wow, there's a new low.
But anyway, I'm sick of winter as well, and I am a little... it really feels like the off-season right now. You know, there's not a whole lot of breaking news for us to cover for our guys, but luckily we have about 10 writers working on the sites now, and they come up with all sorts of interesting talkers, so we have that to talk about. But I thought we should start with an article that blew up a little bit, and it's so sort of organically. If you go to Bleacher Report and you click on Vikings news, there's a good chance you'll see something from Purple PTSD or Vikings Territory, because we help kind of give them local Vikings content. So a lot of our articles, this is a new partnership, but it's been since the first of the year, and a lot of our articles will, if they're on Bleacher Report, obviously they're going to get tens of thousands of views. But this article wasn't picked up by Bleacher Report, but it got a huge response because I think it was controversial in its approach. And the article was written by a Vikings Spin. Jason is his username on the site. He owns a Vikings site called Vikings Spin. He does a podcast, so on and so forth. And the crux of the article was that the Vikings need to move on from Kyle Rudolph. And as somebody who is known for left field takes, I respect the article because he put together a pretty cogent argument. I don't agree with him for reasons I'll get into, but clearly people were all sorts of worked up about it. So I wanted to get your take on it first, Joe, before I got into it.
Well, heck yeah, he didn't win the Man of the Year. Get rid of him. Get him out of here now. I don't agree. I think I would go so far as to say they may need to ask him to restructure to make some room for other people. But with my feeling is when you want to get rid of somebody in pretty much still the prime of his career, what is he? He's probably going to be 30 by now, doesn't he?
Something around there, but he's still, I mean...
Yeah, and if he's,
Kyle Rudolph.
The Vikings have suffered through him with his early injuries, and he's kind of stabilized that. I mean, the first question I always ask is, what are you going to replace him with? And there's nobody on the roster right now that's not going to do what he can do. There's nobody like him. I mean, they have other tight ends, and they are serviceable. I mean, one of them is a great blocking tight end and plays that role well, and Kyle complements that. He's big. He's a big target. He might not be the fastest guy. My criticism of his has always been that he doesn't break many tackles, and I think that's due to the fact that he was trying. In the back of his mind, he doesn't want to get injured again because when he's on the field for the entire season, he puts up some decent numbers, and I think the spin guy put those out there. But he was comparing him to the best guys out there,
That's exactly it,
Alford, and that's why I would say, it's a kind of a non-starter for me. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things there. You explained it well, and I should have explained this first, but basically he looked at Rudolph's best year, which was 2016, where I think he had 83 passes. Or he caught 83 passes rather, and then he compared those numbers or the numbers from 2018 where he was getting 9.9 yards per catch to the three best tight ends in the league, which is you can do that with any position.
Right.
And then the main criticism beyond that was that he's not a good blocking tight end, but we knew that. You and I have talked about Rudolph and him not maybe be some of the people saying he's kind of a wimp. And I think it is a trade-off. You look at even a guy like Gronk, who is known for that, and how he's close to retiring. And what is he, 28?
Yep.
Because of these injuries. And the number one thing that jumped out to me is exactly what you said. And I'm not criticizing Jason for this. I think it's a league-wide thing where people assume they're going out of whole cloth that they're going to either get the same production or better production by making a move. He basically said the guy that they should draft, whose name I wrote down because he's a Big Ten player, T.J. Hawkinson, that we'd have to use a first-round pick to do that. So you look at what this team needs to compete and the number of picks that they have. They did pick up 3 picks this week in the 6th and 7th round. But I'm very against at this point in this experiment with this management creating more needs than you already have. Why put yourself in the position where you need a first round pick for a tight end when you have a guy who is productive and will get you what you need if the situation is better. I mean, the offense fell apart in the second half of the season. It was terrible. I mean, those games with the 4 3-and-outs to begin the game. It's not like Rudolph. His numbers are a part of a collective, which was that the offense wasn't very good for the second half of the season. So to just point out that his numbers and then compare him to these amazing, Hall of Fame guys, I agree with you.
You have to really think about that. But and I was just about to bring up the other downside, or my perceived downside, and it's saying what would the cap hit be if they cut him loose, and much to my surprise, there would be no cap hit. So
then I changed my mind. Get rid of him.
Yeah. So it's always something to consider. But the guy's on your roster. He's under contract. He produces. When given the opportunity, when they throw him the ball, he's a decent player. And that year that you're talking about, he also, I think, had the most touchdowns of any receiver on the team. And he's only a couple years removed from that. So now, granted, it's all about the scheme. And if you're scheme calls for that guy to be the biggest part of your offense, then you should go out and trade for Travis Kelce or trade for well, not Gronk because he's basically done, but
Zach Ertz.
Exactly. And I think the Vikings offense is hopefully moving towards a scheme where it's really balanced, and Kyle Rudolph is a complementary player. His blocking's improved over the years. He's not a great blocker, but they have a really decent blocking tight end, and I don't know. I like it, and I don't think his skills have deteriorated that it's time to get rid of him. You can certainly draft some tight ends under him, and they have done that for years. Just about every year they'll take a tight end and see if Michael Pruitt and all these guys. And I'm all for that, but I don't see the guy out there right now that's available, that's readily going to improve things. If you
Yeah, and I think the motivation behind that article is something I'm seeing a lot, like internally between all of us on Slack when we chat about article ideas, and that's that people are looking at the salary cap and how can they free up more money. I think that writers and some management in the NFL, it's we talk about like how I feel about draft picks versus established players, how like a wide receiver who's good, like a Brandon Marshall who had double-digit touchdowns, was a fifth-round trade, and because they love having draft picks. And it's the same thing I think sometimes with people with the salary cap and having budget. They'd rather have more money than have an established guy. And the Vikings are going to have to do some creative things in regards to their salary cap, because they're there's the Anthony Barr situation, which we won't talk about today, but there's also things like the Adam Thielen situation, which
that's just what I was
that came up this week.
I was going to say that's my answer there, because I saw that next on your agenda, and my comment was, and it's probably pretty basic, but it's salary cap related. If they could get him, if they could extend him and free up some space for the team to sign other people, they will do it. They don't have to extend him. He says he's not going to hold out and took away his bargaining chips, and I take his word on that. But if they can find a way to give him some a bonus up front or a signing bonus, and then I think they will do that. And I think they will endeavor to try to do that. That will be one of their reasons to open up the books with him. So
can they do that? Is that how, I wonder. I'm not the biggest salary cap guy, so I saw something, reading a couple articles about it, saying this is what you just said, which was maybe they could give him a really big signing bonus and then lower the hit that he has per season.
Absolutely
work that way?
I think they do that all the time. That's the way they front end load contracts. And if we went back and looked, Kyle Rudolph was probably front end loaded that way, which is why now at the final year of his contract, which 2019 is for Rudolph, there's no dead cap space. They can let him go because they've given him all this guaranteed money up front. And I think that's how Rob Brzezinski, one of the ways he manipulates the cap is to get these people to front end load their deals, and which a player likes because they get the money now and it's guaranteed money. It's so that they're they could get injured and their career could end tomorrow. So they're willing to sign these things, and then if you're still producing at the end of your deal, then you start talking again. But they certainly can. It's if the player and his agent want to. I'm sure the Vikings would want to try to figure out a way to bring him back, or keep him around, yet make his deal more cap friendly.
So I saw that his agent said that he's not the type of guy to hold out, and he doesn't seem like the type. But I hadn't heard that he had said that, and I don't really need to convince anyone listening of how good Thielen is, but a couple stats just to point out. He was 10th in touchdowns, 10th in yards, average yards per catch, 9th in total yards, 4th in total receptions. His salary was $6.1 million, but his contract average is $4.8 million, and he's getting paid as much as Torrey Smith or Ryan Grant, whoever the hell that is. So yeah, they got to do something. I mean, especially with how much Diggs is making, and they're very complimentary. But Thielen has put up better numbers than Diggs. So, do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, they signed Diggs. They'll do something to correct his salary. I mean, you're right. That point about him not holding out did come from the agent. But okay. I look at Adam Thielen and who he is, and happy to be playing for Minnesota, and he's a walk on and where he's at.
It's like his dream to play for
exactly. I think he's smart enough to realize everything is a fluid in an NFL career, and it could end tomorrow, and he doesn't want to miss any opportunity to play the game. I think he loves it so much.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, you got someone like Le'Veon Bell who was willing to sit out and got wound up and stuff like that. I mean, I went around with my son on that. He thought he should do whatever he can for himself to improve his deal and make money to set himself up. And I said, you know what? NFL careers are they're not that long. So, I mean, you got to strike while the iron's hot. And he was making plenty of money. I thought he made a mistake last year. And
well, he's still getting franchised, which is like a very high amount of money. It's just that there's no guarantee beyond that year, which I can understand. He didn't want to get injured and then hurt his value moving forward. But you're right, especially for running backs who, once they turn 30, they might as well be 80 as far as the way people treat them. And you're taking one of those years off, maybe another one. And then there's reports coming out that the Jets fear that he's like 260 pounds, like he's completely out of shape. And that was the last point that I had on my notes for the Thielen thing, which was that, paying Thielen or extending him, despite the fact that you don't have to, is good for the team's reputation in terms of other free agents coming here. And you look at a guy like Sheldon Richardson who came here, and I remember a time, the Timberwolves have a terrible time getting free agents to come here. Nobody wants to come to Minneapolis. It might as well be Siberia. And the Vikings haven't always had that problem, but you look at, I can think of people like TJ Houshmandzadeh who came here and then took a lesser deal to go to the Seahawks. I was really mad about that. And I do think the Vikings have a good reputation in that regard, that they're managed well, that they run the team well, and then you juxtapose that with the Steelers, who what is going on in Pittsburgh? It's supposed to be like a grade A team with the best ownership and up there with like maybe the 49ers or even more because they've been good recently, or the Patriots, and then you have this amazing core of Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown, and two of them want out, and I haven't really looked into it a ton, but like from your perspective, why do they not like Tomlin? Or I did hear about Big Ben being a bad leader, which I can see because he's been arrested for sexual assault a couple times. But I mean, what is your take on that nightmare?
I haven't looked into it in a big way myself, but you wonder if an organization like the Steelers has so much success that they get a little haughty themselves and say, hey, we'll be fine without, we won with these guys, we can do that. Who knows? And they're not, looking at who their star players are and rewarding them somehow. I don't know. Maybe all the things you just mentioned are involved. Could be. It's hard to say. Maybe they think they're the Patriots and everybody.
I was just going to say that exactly, and that we don't need you, but it's a different dynamic because
it is.
They have those stars, and the Patriots have Brady and a bunch of role players.
I want to go back to the point you made about people not wanting to come here. I think you make a good point that by extending him when he has definitely earned it with the numbers he's put up and how much he's meant to the team and how hard he works and his attitude and everything. He's a Zimmer player to be for sure. Just Adam Thielen. Extend him and get that reputation out there, and you marry that with your new stadium and your new performance center, facility, and people are going to want to come here if they, find that it's a great place to be. I mean, you got a players coach to a degree, I think, in Mike Zimmer. And you got a team that really wants to win, so maybe the Steelers are going to go on a downslide for a while, and these players like Brown and them see it. Brown has always been a little bit of a diva, correct? And so you wonder about that. Le'Veon Bell certainly has a high view of his value, and to a certain extent it's true. He's huge, but on a team like that, it took all of them. So it's so hard on it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost pulling an NBA type attitude in the NFL, and with 50 people on a roster, you can't do that. In the NBA, you can hold out, or you can say, well, I want to be paid, or you can be like LeBron James, because one player out of 5 on that court, it's a huge impact. So I don't know.
And I think the Steelers did show that. I'm sure Le'Veon Bell is a great running back regardless, but you have to look at that offensive line and the system and the results that they had without him. And I honestly thought, because I traded Alvin Kamara for Le'Veon Bell, and what's the running back's name that had cancer? The one that replaced him last year.
Yeah. I can't remember his name, but he played well. Yeah,
he put up really good numbers. He was a top 5 running back for a while, and I thought that would show Bell maybe that he put some fear of God into him, but apparently not. Speaking of, you said Zimmer's a player's coach, and just I saw an article on I think it was FanSided about why Stefanski is the offensive coordinator, and it was the question is a great one. The article, in rereading it, wasn't the greatest because it kept talking about how good-looking Stefanski was, which I found odd. But that article kind of combined with the piece that you put up about the introduction of the new coaches is an interesting one. You look at Stefanski and Kubiak and how the team gave Stefanski that role of his looks.
I made no mention of Stefanski's looks in my article. Just want to put that out there.
Well, you blew it because it's right in front of you. But it is kind of a weird situation because it seemed like Kubiak made all the personnel decisions coming in. In my lifetime, I can't remember an offensive advisor being a role on the team, or a run game coordinator, which Rick Dennison, who's a Kubiak guy, is. The questions kind of raised at the end of the article is maybe there's a difference in opinion between Wilf and Zimmer in regards to Stefanski, and he's obviously been on the team for a long time. Maybe the Wilfs like him as a future head coaching option should things not go the right way this season. I saw some quotes from both Kubiak and Stefanski where Stefanski said that he looked at Zimmer and said, if Kubiak's available, it's a no-brainer. Let's bring him in, which I found interesting. If that was the impetus for it, was Stefanski, that kind of changes my whole perspective on the situation.
Well, you just to interrupt you there, I had that quote in my story, but the whole quote is that he was asked, how this came about, and his first response was, I don't know exactly how it came about.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then he said, but if he's available, this is, we talked and it's a no-brainer. That was his take on it. And then they asked the same question to Kubiak, and he kind of glossed over it as well. Said, Mike and I have talked for years, and we've been friends, and he kind of talked. All of a sudden, when I realized the possibility was there for me to do something there, I was pretty excited about it. So he wouldn't say who approached who. And that gets at the core of this guy's piece to a certain degree, saying, why did this happen? And I don't think either, none of the coaches are going to come out and tell us that. I mean, we can only read the tea leaves and figure out why. And as I put in my article, is this is a little unique. It could cause some awkwardness, to have, to be given. The whole history with Stefanski and the Vikings is becoming kind of interesting, because last year he wanted to go to Shermer and they wouldn't let him interview, and then they said, okay, now go ahead and go interview at Cleveland, and he didn't get the job, and so then they hire him here, and he comes in and they all of a sudden bring in an assistant head coach whatever offensive guy. You know darn well that they're all going to get in the room and they're all going to work up a game plan, and there will be awkwardness about how this all goes down if they let their egos get involved.
Yeah.
If they do it in a very decent way, an organic way that just says, okay, let's put the best game plan on the game here, and it doesn't matter who does it. You have to go execute it. What's his face? Kubiak will be up on the headsets up in the booth,
or on his farm, like he
exactly.
was for a while.
It sounds like it sounds like a good idea in theory. We'll see how it plays out, because it sometimes one of them guys, if you got Dennison, who called plays for Buffalo as well, you've got three guys that have called plays, are going to want to call plays, and you're going to want to say this, and so they're going to have some rough spots. But you look at the other side of the coin. You got Mike Zimmer calling it, when you got George Edwards, who's the de facto defensive coordinator. So it's maybe that's how they want to do things. I don't mind with an unproven Stefanski, which I think he still is unproven as an offensive coordinator, even though he interviewed for a head coaching job. I have no problem with them bringing in a guy who's been a head coach and a really good offensive guy. Now, granted, more towards knows how to build a running game, and I have no problem with that idea in theory. But we got to see how it works out in practice and see how it's going to take them a while. I said last year they made some changes to the defense, and it took them a while to figure themselves out again. I think you're going to see right out of the gate there's going to be some awkwardness and some feeling out to see how this is going to go before they really hit their stride later in the year.
Big time. I gotta feel. There's so many things I feel about this. You look. Yeah, the titles are different, but it's not dissimilar from a couple years ago with Norv Turner, and you had Tony Sperano and Pat Shurmur, all three of which have been former head coaches. That they had different titles, like offensive line coach and.
Right.
I forget what Shurmur was, but that didn't actually end up working out with Norv Turner. But you've got to think maybe Zimmer's a little snake bit by the young up and coming offensive coordinator thing with Stefanski, just because of what happened with DiFilippo last season. On top of that, you have to think that this is like example number 20 to me that this team is so committed on winning a championship. In regards to, trading a first-round pick for Sam Bradford when Teddy went down, bringing in all of these coaches that can't be cheap either. I like you said, in theory, I support it. Just the idea of it to me is great, because I do think that we talk a lot about the team and we don't give a lot of credit very often to the Wilfs, but they are, especially compared to who owned the team before them, they are such good owners. They're not afraid to spend money. I laughed when I left the TCO Performance Center the first time. I think I texted my dad and said, I can't believe the premier NFL headquarters is in Eagan, Minnesota. It's just so strange. It's a great organization, and I can't be mad about that.
No, you're right. They have wanted to do that since they came to town. They were football people to begin with. They're big fans out in New York, and when they bought the team, they didn't come. They weren't used car salesmen that all of a sudden decided I wanted to own a football team. They were, they were somebody that had been in football and not been in it, but wanted to be, and were really interested in the game and followed it. So they want to bring a championship here. They've made a lot of moves to do so, and I don't think you've ever could say that they have not tried to improve their team on the field as a result of being too cheap. They're always they've swung at a lot of different people. They haven't always landed them, but it's not because they're not trying and they're saying, well, I don't want to pay that kind of money. They're putting everything they can into it. And you're right, it's not cheap to hire all those coaches. Those aren't go against the salary cap, so they get what they get. And they the other thing is, I wanted to bring up the fact that the Vikings have had so many different coaches come in here that have had coaching experience, a whole bunch of them. But then I think about it and said, my goodness, the way coaches move around in this league, everybody eventually is going to have it. They're going to
Yeah.
coach somewhere for a couple of years, get fired, and then go look for another coordinator job or an assistant job. So it's, maybe that's not as surprising to me as it is to me. It shouldn't be. I don't know, but I applaud the Wilfs too for what they've done and what they built here. You can complain all you want about what happened when they were building the stadium and how much money that we as public paid for it here. That to me that's the cost of doing business, I guess. And
exactly, it's the cost of living in a major city.
Yes, and so I give them a pass there. But the rest of the things they've done, I think they've really tried to do it, and they still have a chance. To do it with this group, if they can get the offense figured out, get the coaching staff. I worry about, and I mentioned in my article that is this going to be another step back with a whole new offense coming in here that all the offense has got to learn, and there's going to be some growing pains with it, but hopefully they coalesce quickly, and it sounds like Stefanski's on board with this Kubiak move, and Kubiak seems excited as heck to be back, as he put it, in the foxhole and go into battle. So that stuff excites me, but it's still got to be worked out on the field.
And there's the new offensive coordinator who you joked it's going to take you half or full season to spell his name correctly. There was an interesting quote from him, or a set of quotes, about the kicking game, and I found it interesting just because we had Chris Cluey on the show a couple weeks ago. And the biggest thing I took away from that interview was that college, the NFL, no special teams coaches really know kicking, like the technique of it. They don't sit you down and say, maybe you should move over 2 inches to the left, or maybe you got a hitch in your whatever. And the quotes from him were encouraging in that regard. I mean, first he said all options are on the table in regards to the kicking positions. Dan Bailey had an up and down year. I think he ended with like 75% completions, and he had never been below 84% in his career. So they're looking at the draft and free agents and so on and so forth. But part of the quote was about evaluating these kickers mentally, and also taking a look at their technique and sitting them down and talking to them about that, how they're kicking, maybe how the difference between when they're successful and when they're not. So he seems like a guy who, I know he had some struggles himself when he was down in Miami, so I think he's been through it, but he seems like a very open guy in general in regards to what's going to happen, but also very perhaps empathetic and talking to them about what's going on in their head, what's going on physically. And that seems to me to be different from what we've had with what's his Prefer.
Yeah, to be honest, when I sat down to write this story yesterday, I plan on getting the money quotes from all the three coaches, but once I got into the Kubiak and Stefanski, I never got to Maloof, if that's how you say his name, and so I figured I'd visit that and a little more. Dive a little bit deeper into what he said, but it sounds like what you say is he brings an interesting perspective, and he has been through it, and so we'll see how he goes. But hopefully they do take a different approach. Like Chloe said, it's up to them. Maybe all you can do is really prepare physically and practice all week, and hopefully you have the mental makeup to go out there in the field in a pressure situation and get the job done. But that's the same can be said about anybody. Could say that same thing about the quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who prepares like crazy, and there's nobody that's going to out prepare him. And then, boy, sometimes on Sunday he looks a little skittish that things are going to surprise him out there, because the other side of the ball, they're doing some stuff just for that express purpose. So that's the nature of the game. But yeah, I think it's good to have some new blood in here. Hopefully Maloof is the right guy. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I hope they keep Bailey, personally. I don't want to go through another rookie, because it's just such a roll of the dice. And when you can look at some of those misses that Bailey had as a holding issue. I remember two off the top of my head that were bad holds. So, and he's proven that when he retired, he was the second most accurate kicker in NFL history. So, if he wants to come back, that'd be great. I don't want to go through the whole Blair Walsh situation again, where they can fall apart at any time.
I'd like to see him come back too, and I will also be keeping an eye on on Daniel Carlson to see how his career proceeds now. He got to go out there. He got that mulligan to go back out to the Raiders and play or kick without pressure. So we'll see. It might be the thing that lets him have a long career, and he might be just what the Vikings saw on him. But that whole situation is, there's going to be some regret involved if he becomes a really good kicker. But the Vikings were in a position to have a rookie kicker if they had aspirations for the Super Bowl. It's just not ideal situation. So
I'll be watching Cleveland too with Prefer.
Cleveland. Oh, they got. Prefer. Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to touch on just was options in the run game. There's people out there that have talked about the Vikings bringing in Le'Veon Bell. The reality of it is I mean, maybe I'm wrong, Joe. You can let me know your thoughts on this, but I don't think Latavius Murray's coming back. I don't think they can afford to pay him maybe what the market would, and I think he's made it clear that he wants to be the starter. And I think he's proven that he can do that in Oakland and when he filled in. My fear is that Cook so far hasn't been able to show that he can play a full 16 games, and I fear that if you put all your chips on him without having I know they have Rock Thomas and Mike Boone, but Latavius Murray made the Pro Bowl in Oakland, and you kind of hope that they have like a 1-2 punch. And there's a list of running backs that I put on an article on Vikings territory that will be available, at least potentially. Mark Ingram was the only one that really stood out to me. I know Mike Davis did okay in Seattle. I think he had 514 yards, 5 total touchdowns, 34 catches. I don't think we need a scat back or a receiving. We need a blocking and thumping running back. So Ingram's had that role with Kamara, so it just makes sense, but he might be too expensive as well. So I'm a little worried about the run game.
Yeah, it's a good point worth bringing up. There's going to be some change there. There's no question. I agree with you. I think Murray's gone for all the reasons that you said. Most specifically, he wants to start, and with that comes more money. So he proved that while he was here, that he can, and I'd hate to see him go. I mean, attitude of that player. I mean, he played on a bad ankle for the Vikings and played as hard as he could, and then once he got healthy, showed that what he's capable of, and he filled in well for Dalvin Cook. So I hate to see him go, but I'm pretty much sure he's gone. Dalvin Cook, I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit there. Yes, he has not stayed on the field for the whole season yet, but didn't we used to say that about Kyle Rudolph? And ultimately, I don't think it's a matter of lack of toughness or whatever. Injuries are a freak thing. They happen. They're going to happen. And if I've seen Dalvin Cook in the locker room, and he's well put together. So I don't know that.
My fear is, not to interrupt you, but my fear is comparing him to Kyle Rudolph. My initial thought was, well, a running back can't really alter the way that he gets hit the way that perhaps a tight end can. I mean, he can a little bit, maybe not pushing for extra yards, but both of his injuries have been non-contact injuries. He tore his ACL just cutting on a run, and then his hammy was, he pulled his hammy running. So that's my concern. But
what does that say? Does that say that he's prone to these kinds of injuries?
Or he's just unlucky?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where I have to lean. I mean, what can you say? I mean, the guy's got all-world talent. If you can keep him on the field, and you have to put somebody. You need someone like Murray behind him, that can really step in and really be a starting running back. I don't know if Boone and Thomas are quite there, but they're close. I don't know. I don't think the Vikings will spend a lot of money at this position. They may draft somebody in the lower rounds and try to build from the bottom up. Because like you said, on the Vikings side, letting Murray go is going to be a place that they can find some room in the cap. So
yeah, and they have it's there's been a little bit of a renaissance with running backs in the draft with guys like Zeke or Todd Gurley. Before them, it was running backs. I think there was a year where not a single running back got taken in the first round, like they were, just because of the way that the game is played. and you have the Vikings getting those 3 extra picks this week. I think 1 in the 6th, 2 in the 7th.
2 in the 7th, yeah.
And they've done a good job of finding talent late in those rounds. But I like you said, Joe, I think they're going to lean towards the draft and find like Toby Gerhardt. That's a horrible example.
But you can find them. You can find running backs out there because they're not as valued. I remember how we've always heard for years that the Vikings that teams can find wide receivers late in the draft, and the Vikings prove that's true. They've got two. I don't know if they're all pros, but they're certainly Pro Bowl receivers, and one was undrafted, the other one's a 5th rounder. So I think that's the way it's starting to happen with running backs. I mean, look at all these backup running backs that have, played well. I mean, you mentioned a couple already in the show, in Seattle and in for the Steelers. So that's possible to do that. In the meantime, you got a couple placeholders in Boone and Thomas who are decent. But they're not great, but so they'll draft somebody, and I don't think they'll spend a lot of money.
They have Amir Abdullah, all Big Ten running back from Nebraska.
I think he's a free agent though, so he'll be gone as well. So.
Break the bank, bring him back. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Keep an eye on PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. It'll be linked in the articles on Vikings Territory and Purple PTSD. That's going to be like ground zero for all of our shows, both video and audio. I'm actually going to tour some office space here in about an hour, and where the dream or the hope is that we're going to be able to put together a recording studio with like a actual desk and a green screen, and then like
can I show up to the office in my underwear?
Please do.
Because that's what I'm used to, Joe. So,
well, I want them to know what they're getting themselves into. It's going to be a Howard Hughes situation, just
nice
urine everywhere. Anyway, this has been Morning Joe's. I always like to end the show on a jar of urine joke.
Yes, that's great.
We'll be back next week, and check out GrayDuckSpirits.com, and there's a link or a tab at the top for where to buy. You can buy Gray Duck at a ton of over 500 locations in the state of Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. They're actually expanding into Iowa soon as well. I've been highlighting a contest that they're running that's going to be on the 7th of March, where you'll be able to go to Inside Edge Golf Simulation in Eden Prairie and play a round of simulated golf with Greenway. You basically, one of those things where you hit the ball at a screen and it's all, computerized and amazing. Check that out. I'll link that in the article as well. They're going to announce the winner on the 1st of March. So there's still time to check that out. But this has been Morning Joe's. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will be back next week.